Today I will have the company of the CEO of lawpilots, who is Philipp Bülow. Philipp, wanna introduce yourself, say a few words?
Hello, yes, my name is Philipp Bülow. I'm in Berlin, Germany, and I'm the CEO, and I'm happy to present to you our company, but later, before Fábio will start.
Thank you, Philipp. So we'll have a short presentation, and then we'll talk about the partnership with lawpilots. So if everyone can see my screen, of course, for most people that are here, you probably heard already of the LGPD, or the data protection law in Brazil. We've been working with the LGPD for some time already. It's been around 2.5 years, or even more, around 3 years that we've been, helping companies to adequate themselves to the regulation. And before that, of course, before Brazil having a comprehensive privacy law, we also had a number of different laws in the legal framework protecting, privacy and providing data protection to people in general. So today I won't bring lots of new information on the law. It's the basic concepts, because we want to talk about the partnership that we've put together with lawpilots. So that's the main purpose of today. But in any case, this is the agenda here. You see that we're going to do a quick introduction to the law, then talk about a practical approach after, let's say, 3 years doing adequacy projects for many companies. We've done more than 80 different projects in different segments of the commercial activity for companies of all sizes. We know what's practical now. So it's of course it's always a challenge within the company, but we know what to do from a practical standpoint. Then do's and don'ts. Data protection as a competitive advantage, and then introduction to the partnership between lawpilots and Veirano. We'll present lawpilots, Philipp will do that, and then we'll give you an overview of the course that is aimed at employees from companies. So we're doing, for your understanding, for example, we are doing the training at Veirano for our employees here with the lawpilots course. And then Philipp approached me, more than a year ago, and we decided to go ahead and prepare a course that's totally tailored according to the LGPD, and it's very interesting to do. So we're going to be presenting this course to you guys as well. And then how do I get started? So how I start the process of training my employees, and how lawpilots and Veirano can help. Okay, so a quick introduction to the law. So why do I need to have an LGPD training after all? So why is that important? Compliance with the regulation is everyone's responsibility. Yesterday, we had a response from a party that was working with one of our clients, and the party said, one of the companies that is working with one of our clients, and they said, well, we are not subject to the LGPD. And of course they are, because they are operating in Brazil, and of course they have personal data. They even deal with personal data for that specific client of ours. So we see that it's still tough for some companies to understand why they are, why it's necessary to comply with the LGPD, and why that's important. So it is everyone's responsibility, because both the controllers who own or who control the data, and the processors who will process the data on behalf of controllers, they all will have responsibility in this chain of data processing. So it's important that we keep that in mind before starting anything. So first of all, the LGPD has a broad application, and will impact, and is already impacting a number of sectors in the Brazilian economy, demanding active effort from everyone to avoid sanctions and to be compliant. So most of you that probably heard of many investigations that have started, and penalties applied already based on the LGPD. So that's an important point to bring, and we'll talk about this a bit more later. But recent research carried out in Brazil by a consulting and risk management company suggests that most Brazilian private entities are yet not ready for the LGPD. So they don't feel comfortable, or they don't have the means to be fully compliant with the new Brazilian regulation. Of course, there is a need to put some effort there, and that's what the Data Protection Authority in Brazil, named ANPD or ANPD, is looking at. So they are really setting an agenda for these couple of years, last year and this year, and the regulatory agenda of the INPD is really aiming at covering different points of the law, and most of them have to do with the companies being fully compliant with the regulation. So that's why it's very important that we look at the ANPD as a body that will be regulating the law, but of course they will give us a sense. It's like a thermometer of what's happening in terms of regulation and what we can expect in the years to come in terms of compliance. Okay. Authorities in Brazil, such as the Public Attorney's Office in Brasilia and the Consumer Protection Office, they've been applying the LGPD already. So there is an effort from those bodies in applying protecting the consumers' data rights. So we're going to talk about this as well. But the consumers will most of the time be data subjects. So they will towards companies, they will be the owners of the data. So it's important to look at not only the INPD, which is regulating the LGPD, but also look at the consumer protection bodies decisions, and also the Attorney's Office in Brasilia. They have a special unit that deals with data protection and artificial intelligence. So they are running a number of investigations. Last year, we had information that they have more than 50 different investigations at this time, running. So it's a worldwide trend to protect and give the proper protection and framework for data. So it's most important market assets that are providers, your clients, they will be asking for that. So client needs data protection processing agreements, or they have provided me with this set of clauses and we need to be compliant. So they are experiencing a market demand for data protection, right? So what's the LGPD? What's the law? So the law is a comprehensive data protection regulation that is enforced in Brazil since September 2020, and it sets forth the most important requirements for controllers and processors when processing personal data. The law will provide for the protection of data subjects, and the data subjects are us, right? The natural persons or the citizens who own their data, who are the owners of the data. The law is very protective to those data subjects, or to those users, or to those consumers whenever they are in a consumer relationship. So the law will set the situations under which the data can be processed, and of course the formal requirements for data, as well as conditions for that person or that committee or that external provider that can act as a liaison between the data subject and the company, the controller, the data subject and the processor, or the controller and the processor and the data protection authority. So the DPO is a compliance officer for data, for dealing with data protection and privacy. As I said, the regulatory body that is handling most of the aspects of data protection in Brazil and is developing the legislation, is providing guidance, is the Data Protection Authority that was created as a part of the national government and is moving towards becoming an autarky. So it will have independence from the government in the future. So we're looking to that as well. But the Data Protection Authority is the most important body there. It's the body that is issuing all the guidance around data. Enforcement of the law started in August 1st, 2021. So it's been around 6-7 months or even less, 6 months that the law is being enforced. And the Data Protection Authority has already said that they will, of course, go on with the investigations, and the penalties can be applied, if any, they can be applied to acts that happened after 2021, after August, to the current period. So they are applying penalties. They are enforcing the regulation. So that's why it's important to be compliant and to do the right thing about compliance with the data protection law. So the violations in Brazil to the legislation can lead to penalties, and of course it won't start with a penalty unless it's a very reckless processing of data. But we are talking about fines up to 2% of the total revenue of the economic group in Brazil in the previous year, or 50 million Brazilian reais, which is around 8 million or 9 million US dollars per violation. So there is a huge concern among companies that they are really compliant, because no one wants to receive a penalty like this one. If you follow the international legislation, you've seen that the French authority, the Portuguese authority, the Danish authority, and many others data protection authority, they have already applied similar fines to data controllers in their countries. So the main goals of the legislation are, to guarantee the privacy and protection of the citizens' personal data. So that's the main purpose of the legislation. It's a very consumer and very user protection legislation. I see that I'm not sharing just a second. I'm not sharing my screen, so I'm talking and the screen is not there for some reason. Hang on. Now I think I'm back. Good. I'll leave this here so that we can keep track. So it's a very consumer protection, a very important legislation to protect the consumer rights and the users' rights, and it's very in line with the consumer defense code in Brazil. It also provides clear rules for companies. So it establishes how companies will protect, store, use, and share personal data. It of course promotes development, because when Brazil enters this line of having a comprehensive data protection legislation, it also fosters the economic developments and the technological developments, and of course that's important in a society that is very data driven now, right? Most of the players in Brazil, the companies themselves, they're finding compliance with the LGPD as a true differential in the markets, because they see the company as being in an adequate level of protection, so they can show that as a difference, as something that is different from their competitors. You probably saw a number of advertisements from companies like Itaú, for example, that they have advertisements saying that Itaú is concerned with their privacy. That's the same with Apple, with the privacy of individuals. So it's very important that we use that as a competitive advantage. As I said, it's a law that is very similar to the consumer protection legislation. It provides, of course, reliability in the collection and use of personal data, and increases the legal certainty in relation to the data processing activities. So as very similarly to the GDPR, the law will apply to any personal data collected from individuals located in Brazil. So everyone that is in Brazil, even though is not a Brazilian, but it's in the country for some reason, and there is collection of data there, the law will be applicable to that relationship. Any processing activity that is performed in Brazil, and any offer of goods and services to individuals located in Brazil. So these are the situations where the LGPD will apply. It will not be applicable to public security situations where, for example, the government will have to collect data for public security reasons, or when the data is just passing by Brazil, but it's in transit and it's not really assessed in Brazil, but it's only in transit to another country, or when you collect data for personal, non-commercial, journalistic, artistic, or academic uses or purposes. Again, that's not defined in the regulation yet, so we still have to look for guidance from the Data Protection Authority in that regard. So when we think about using those exceptions, we need to be very cautious. Okay. It's a very principological legislation, and that has to be with the GDPR itself, because the regulation in Brazil was very much inspired in the European regulation. So it has a number of principles, and the important principles are here. So purpose, use the data for legitimate purposes, for a limited use, in an adequate manner. So adequacy is another principle. As needed, so with necessity, it needs to be used with the character of data minimization. So just use the data that you need to use, really, and not more than that. You have to provide free access to the data subject. So one of the data subject rights is to look at the data and get access to that data if necessary. Keep the data accurate, clear, and up to date, so ensure quality. Transparency of the use of the data, provide effective security measures and safety and security to the data subjects and to the data itself. And that's something that, again, the Data Protection Authority is regulating, so they will issue additional guidance on what are the necessary administrative and technical measures to be used, for data protection. Prevention, of course, you need to try and prevent as much as possible any damages to the data subjects or any damages to their data. So that means due diligence, periodically audits, training. So that's where we thought that the partnership with lawpilots would be very, very useful, because we will see that in 90% of the cases, and perhaps Philipp will talk about that, in 90% of the cases, the data incident will relate to the maluse or the misuse of the data by an employee, or a service provider, or a client, or whoever is dealing with that data. So there's a human intervention there that is very, very much the case in most situations. Okay, so that's why training is very important. Non-discrimination, so not to use the data for any discriminatory purposes, and accountability. So that's an important principle. So you be accountable for the data that you handle and the data that you process according to the LGPD. Okay, so those are the 10 principles that the law brings. I spoke about data, so you see here that you have different types of data mentioned in the regulation. Anonymized data, that's where you can't really relate to a natural person. You can't identify an individual. So that's why it's anonymized. Identifiable data, that's where you can possibly get to identify someone, identify a natural person, and then the identify data, which is, of course, you see the picture here, you can identify the person. And again, the law defines those types of data in a very comprehensive way. So if we start here in the bottom of the pyramid, you see, there's general commercial information, then there is the anonymized data, and the anonymized data is the data that does not contain the data subject's identification element. So that means that when the data is properly anonymized, then you can handle that data because it will not be considered personal data. The anonymization, requirements, it demands a separate discussion. But the message here is if you can anonymize the data for any purposes, and if you do that correctly in a way that the data cannot be de-anonymized, then of course you can use the data without any problems, because you can't link that data to any specific individual or to any specific data subject. Okay, so that's the main principle of anonymization. Pseudonymous data, which is when you have the reversibility of the anonymization. So that means that you can reverse the anonymization process, and then by linking elements, you can come to the data itself, and then you can, of course, relate to an individual. Then the definition of personal data, I'm coming from the bottom to the top. So the definition of the personal data, which according to the LGPD is very comprehensive, is very broad. So it says, any data that can identify someone, identify a natural person, can be personal data. So we are talking about IP numbers, IP addresses, location elements, electronic identifiers. We're talking about pictures, about name and of course name, address, CPF, and other things. But anything, even financial information, when it's able to identify someone, can be considered personal data. Okay, and then the law brings a special category of data, which is the sensitive personal data, and then the definition there is what we call it. It's a comprehensive, exhaustive definition. So the sensitive personal data are those categories that are listed in this slide here. So racial and ethnic origin, religion, convictions, political opinions, membership of trade unions or organizations of religious, philosophical, or political character, any data related to health or sexual life, and genetic or biometrical data. And of course, most of the companies, they will somehow and sometimes collect sensitive personal data. And of course, the processing of that information will be, different from processing just personal data, because, sensitive personal data is a category of data that can, in a way, lead to discrimination. For example, it's a data that has a potential of a higher damage to the individual, to the data owner. So it's important to, in a way, be more cautious with the sensitive personal data. And then, of course, the data of children and adolescents, that are set forth in the LGPD, as well as a special category of data. So I spoke a little bit about, data processing, about the principles of the regulation, about what types of data the law provides for. So who are the data subjects in the end of the day? The data subjects is any, or are any natural persons whose the data belong to. Examples of data subjects would be consumers, employees, patients in a hospital, commercial representatives, your clients as a physical person, your employees, mainly, as it says here. And of course, the LGPD won't apply to any data belonging to legal entities. So any legal entities data would fall outside the scope of the LGPD, okay? This is probably the most important slides. Whenever I do this presentation, it says, well, this is the most important information that you can get from here, because in the end of the day, the companies should be able to allow for the data subjects, the persons, to exercise their rights. And exercise their rights means that the data subjects will be in a position that they can have all of those rights in these slides really available, and they are able to exercise those. So confirmation of existence of processing, I can send an email or a request to a company and ask, there is I want to know if you process my data. And that has become a challenge in most of the European countries and in Brazil, because there are already, startups that can do that for you. They will, send over, hundreds of messages asking for information on the processing of that data, or confirmation of data processing to whoever you ask for. So banks, mileage programs, hospital, pharmacies, and whoever you can ask. So that's a request that you can make. As a company, you have to be ready to provide that information. So correction of incomplete, inaccurate, or out of date data, anonymization of data, deletion of data, that's another right, portability of the data to another controller or to another processor, deletion of the data processed with consent, and we'll see about those legal bases. Information about public and private entities which the controller has shared the data with. In your activities, in your company, you most likely share data with many other service providers, and the data subjects will have to have that information. They can ask for that information. They should be provided with that information by any company. Okay, information of the response of the possibility of not giving consent, and what happens if you don't provide your consent in the case that the consent is needed. Withdrawal of the consent, or meaning that you can at any time withdraw consent from a specific consent that you have given to a company. For example, review of the decisions made by machines or automated processes. So if there is a decision, for example, not to provide credit to a person, and that decision was only made by algorithms, they will, the data subject can, of course, request a review of that process. Okay, so there's a number of data rights, and of course, you can now the data subject can petition against the controller or the company before the National Data Protection Authority. So they can complain about a data processing activity to the the Data Protection Authority. So what's process of personal data? Any operation carried out with personal data from collection to elimination. So that means if you process personal data, if you collect data, and if you process personal data, if you have even just access to that data, you are doing a processing activity. Okay, that's the definition of the law. And of course, there are a number of situations where you can process personal data, and those are the situations where you can process personal data. So if there is a legal or regulatory obligation to do so, if you execute an agreement with the data subject, if there is a need to protect the health of the data subject, if there is a need to protect the life of the data subject, if you are doing a study by research entities only, if you are in the regular exercise of rights in a judicial, administrative, or arbitration procedure, for the protection of credit, for public policies by the public administration, of course, with the consent of the data subject, and for legitimate interest purposes. So those are the 10 legal bases that the law set forth for the processing of personal data. So consent is not the only legal basis there is there. You can also, process personal data in a number of other situations that is not consent, okay? But of course, in some situations, you may be required to ask for the data subject consents. This is for personal data per se. When it comes to sensitive personal data, you don't have the legitimate interest legal basis, because you can't use the legitimate interest to process a sensitive personal data. You cannot do that under a contract, and you can use that for the prevention of fraud instead of for the protection of credit. Okay, but there are 8 legal bases there that can be used again for the processing of personal data. If you are, for example, in a contractual relationship, in a situation where you have an employment agreement, you could process personal data for sensitive personal data for certain means or for certain activities, and there are also all those legal bases there. You have to remember that you cannot process you cannot process personal data forever. So you have to look at the purpose, if it has been achieved, if the data is no longer required, if there is the processing period has ended, if the data subject has made any requests or statements around that processing, if there's legal determination to do so. So most of the challenge that we see in the companies that we work with is that they will keep data subject, they will keep data from data subjects for a longer period of time or even forever, and that's a problem with the new regulation there. There is of course, liability and loss compensation, and the controller and the processor can be, found liable for moral or material damages or collective damages even, and they are obligated to redress it. It's not a situation where, it's simply an employee coming to request information, and then it goes to court and then requires damages and then receives it, or a consumer coming to the consumer protection body or the consumer court and then requesting loss and damages. It needs to be a proven situation, but you have to bear in mind that there is a potential for those lawsuits to increase in Brazil because it's foreseen in the legislation. Okay, and then finally, the administrative sanctions that the law will provide for. So we are talking about warnings, the disclosure of the infraction itself, the elimination of the personal data, so the data protection authority can require the company to eliminate that data. The fines that I mentioned, there are 50 million per infraction. The blockage of that personal data, simple fines of up to 2% of the sales revenue of the group in Brazil, the partial suspension of the database's operation for 6 months, the suspension of the data processing activity for up to 6 months, and then the partial or total prohibition of data processing, which is a very bad situation. And finally, something that is not mentioned here, but it's the damage, the damage the reputation of a company. Of course, if you have a data incident, if you have leakage of data in a situation, you'll be subject to a huge reputational damage that it's sometimes very difficult to quantify. So that's why it's important to be compliant and to try and respect the rights of the data subject, as I mentioned in the very beginning there. So what needs to be done? I mean, in a practical approach, you have to indicate a focal point or a project leader. You have to have internal engagement, so you have to get everyone involved, having committees to discuss, the compliance to the data protection law within the company, create awareness and get engagement from, the higher bodies within the company, the management of the company. You have to map all processing activities, so that's very important. Sometimes the clients will come and say, well, can you change my privacy policy in order to be compliant with the LGPD? It's easy to do that, but the privacy policy won't reflect what the reality is in terms of data processing. So it's important to map the activities there. Establish the legal basis and purposes for the processing activities. As I mentioned in the other slides, define which legal base you have to process each type of data in each processing activity. Define the data retention periods. So for how long will I keep that data in specific categories of data? So that needs to be done as well. Set the level of risk for each, data processing activity. So what's the risk here? Is it a low risk, a medium risk, a high risk? It's a high risk processing activity. And if it's so, what am I doing to ensure that that data is protected? There is the safeguards necessary for the process activity there. And of course, at the end or during the process, draft and review documents so that the consumer is the customer is completely supported by the law, and review the governance policies and corporate practices in a way that you can ensure the rights of data subjects. So these are, perhaps the major steps that anyone has to do in order to be compliant with the regulation. And looking at the latest statements of the Data Protection Authority in Brazil, I can say that if you do that, you'll be showing that you have taken steps forward to be compliant with the regulation, and that the authority will look into that. They will ask for information on what you've done in your company and how you've achieved those actions in your company. If you're showing that you're doing that, or if you're in the process of doing those steps, then of course, the Data Protection Authority will consider that whenever issuing a penalty or issuing a sanction as the law provides for. Finally, identify documents that need to be prepared and reviewed. Here we have some examples there. So, an external and internal privacy policy for third parties, providers, clients, for example, inter-group agreements to allow, data transfers between companies of your economic group, for example, security policies, IT use policies. You have to nominate a GPO, and that's a very important thing, or get a provider to be your GPO. At Veirano, we are doing the GPO as a service, as a way to help our clients navigate in the data protection framework, and provide that type of GPO to the authority, that name, and then we would be acting on behalf of the company. So we are doing that. Protocol in case of data breaches. So what to do, what's the process there, and data protection clauses in your commercial and labor agreements. Okay. Do's and don'ts, I'll leave that for you to read after, so that I can leave some time for Philipp. Okay. And then think about data protection as a competitive advantage. So if you've done your compliance with the LGPD, you can advertise that. It's not bad. I mean, we had a client that says, well, I don't want to perhaps put there, out there that I've done the adequacy project. And I said, well, that's a good thing, because even if you don't put it out there, if you don't say that you are compliant with the LGPD, people will come to you, the clients will come and ask, your employees will come and ask, and perhaps the data protection will come and ask for information. So if you are compliant, show that, because that's something that can be used as a competitive advantage. As I said, there's an increasing concern from everyone in this chain with compliance with the LGPD. The government is enforcing the regulation, and there are even more robust data protection guidelines coming from the Data Protection Authority, and this culture of data protection and information security and cybersecurity and corporate government practices, of course, will even increase your reputation, or get you in a better position when you talk about data protection compliance. Finally, we come to the aim of this presentation. That was to introduce the partnership between Veirano and lawpilots, and I will just give the first slide on this, and then pass the floor to Philipp. But we started this partnership a year and a half ago. Philipp has is the CEO of lawpilots, a well-known company in Berlin with activities in many other states within the EU and with activities in the US and other parts of the world. And Philipp approached me 1 year and a half ago, and we thought about, well, there is the LGPD. Brazil is a very important market. The companies need to be compliant with the LGPD. And again, the most important thing is that the employees are trained in a way that they can be also responsible for compliance with the LGPD. So the course is an e-learning course. After the completion of the course, the employees, they will, of course, develop sustainable awareness of data protection. So that's a very important thing, because they will think before, acting, operating or processing data. It's fully in Portuguese. It's fully tailored according to the LGPD. It took us a year to put it together, even though we had some sort of let's say in Portuguese, a glue or some guidance from lawpilots, because they had done that with the GDPR. We tailored it totally to the Brazilian reality, and it's offered on demand, so the company can train its employees, increase adherence, and of course improve the protection of the regulatory framework. So I'll let Philipp talk about the course, and I'll stop sharing my screen. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, you have the QR code there. So please just scan the QR codes, and then we can get connected on LinkedIn, and the presentation will be available to everyone who is in the meeting now. I will now stop sharing my screen, and I will pass the word to Philipp with pleasure. So Philipp, thanks for waiting there patiently for 43 minutes. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Fábio. That was pretty interesting. Thanks a lot. And as you said, you touched some of my topics, so that was helpful. Let me share my screen as well. I brought some slides as well, and let me do this full screen. And yeah, and I really liked what you said at the end, that really this is a competitive advantage for a company, and I will touch upon this as well. So, and yeah, happy to speak here today. Yeah, if you have questions, definitely we have a Q&A afterwards as well for Fábio and myself. And yeah, I want to present to you a bit what Fábio already presented, how we work together and what lawpilots is doing. So yeah, we are number one when it comes to e-learnings in Europe, definitely, but we are already active in Brazil now together with Veirano. We are active in the States. We are active in Asia as well. We translated some of the trainings in Chinese now, in Japanese, in Vietnamese, so always on request. So when the company requests this, then we translate it at the end. So we have over 30 trainings, over 1,000 active customers all over the world, and trained more than 1 million employees. So the question is here, does really data protection training always have to be boring? And that's where lawpilots comes into effect. And I want to present to you how we actually overcome this challenge. So the thing is with employees in a company is that they are super unsure how to behave legally and compliant. It doesn't matter in which area you are or you work, you're always challenged with data privacy, compliance, IT security topics. And you question yourself, what am I allowed to do, and who do I have to ask, and yeah, what is allowed basically. And that makes it very difficult, especially because yeah, the topic is super abstract, super difficult to understand. The motivation is low when it comes to legal or yeah, technical trainings, and it's a massive overload because there are constantly new requirements popping up. LGPD is an example for this. In Europe, we have the Whistleblowing Act now, so it's always a challenge for companies, and they they have problems in facing that and yeah, taking care of that by themselves. So a bit about lawpilots. So we are a pretty young company. We were founded in 2017 by experts. So Katrin and Simone, they are my co-founders. I joined the company a bit later because I was involved in a different company before. And yeah, the perfect the timing because we already knew that the GDPR, so the European Data Protection Law, came into effect in 2018. So we were already up and running before actually the GDPR came into effect. But maybe one step back. So the problem is really, and that's what Fábio always already told you, is that there are high fines, and not even in, or not only in Europe or the rest of the world, but in Brazil as well. So it comes to high fines if you violate yeah, the laws. But it's not only the high fines, it's the loss of the image, it's the customer trust for the company, really. So what you lose. So it's a big topic to be aligned with the different laws. And that's something Fábio said as well, but that's a very important topic. Data protection or compliance violations are usually committed by employees. So that's basically the last piece of the chain that is the employee. So if the employee doesn't know what he or she has or is allowed to do, then that's the problem. Then, as well, as I said, regulatory requirements are becoming increasingly strict, and more are popping up every year. And when it comes to these trainings, companies are uncertain in what to choose, because face-to-face trainings are super time-consuming and are very expensive. The classic online training you see out there is relatively boring and old-fashioned. And content is often super narrow and focused on the law, and is difficult for an employee to understand. So that's the reason we came up with lawpilots. And our idea is really to present innovative e-learnings to everyone in the company. So how do we do this, and what makes our e-learning special? So the main idea is really that you're flexible, and that we that emotions are involved, because, as I said, most of the trainings are super boring. The flexibility means you can do the trainings whenever you want, wherever you want. So you're not restricted to a place and a date, really. You get the link, and then you can do the training from everywhere you want, basically. Of course, you should do it in the next couple of days or weeks, and you shouldn't spend years for completing the course. But you are definitely more flexible than in a normal training. I don't want to talk too much about this because Fábio already told you about it. But so the LGPD is one of our newest trainings, and it's a big topic. Not even for Brazilian companies, but for European companies as well, who are active in Brazil. And we felt that our customers really requested that, and then I reached out and got connected to Fábio and to Veirano, and then we decided to work on the training, and it's it's really a very entertaining and engaging training, as all of our trainings. But I will speak about this a bit later. Here you see the agenda, but so the topics, these are ones Fábio already mentioned to you. The training is available in English and in Portuguese / Brazilian, and you have the chance as well to test the training as well. But at the end of the presentation, I will present that to you.
And maybe just Philipp, to say that it's Portuguese from Brazil, really, and not from Portugal. We've even adapted that as well with the differences in the language, so it's really tailored.
Yeah, that's good that you say that. That was actually new for me, because I thought that Portuguese is more or less the same, but then you told me it's more or less completely different here and there. So that's correct. So we translated it into the Brazilian needs. How does our DNA looks? We have something which we call the Magnificent Seven, which is variety, emotions, practical examples, choices, and that's really something we are known for. And I present to you now quite fast how that actually looks and how this magic sauce comes into place. So on the one hand, you have the storytelling, which is important. So we present to employees real lifetime or real examples. So what does it really mean for you as an employee in your company? So it's not a typical multiple choice. Is it A or B? It's more you learn something and then there's an example and you have to be smart enough to understand what the example means for you as an employee and for your company. So storytelling is important. And that's what really employees really love, that they dive into a role or into a situation and they understand more and more what the different topics are about. The same when it comes to practical examples. So that really means what we ask the employee, what does it mean for you as an employee for your company? And why do we actually train these topics? And that's something what the employees really love as well. Then we have something which is called infographics, which employees like as well, where really facts are stated with small examples as well. But as I said, the mix is really the magic sauce. Then we have these explanatory videos, which we create ourselves in-house, where, in this case here, Lucy Law, the pilot, flies through the storm of LGPD or GDPR and understands more and more what everything is about. And that's what people like. And here the gamification is an important part as well. And as I said, it's not the typical multiple choice. It's really two employees have a conversation and they have a problem, and one employee in this example is trying to help the other employee. Through different questions, they try to figure out what's the right and correct answer here. And to be honest, I've seen many online trainings around the world, and even competitors or from all around the world. They have problems when it comes to legal topics, because that's really, I think, the golden discipline, which is really hard to shape and put in a course, which is easy to understand or easy to understand and easy to digest. And that's really what we are known for, is that we take this very complicated topics and laws and put it into these trainings. And that's really what we did with Veirano and Fábio's team, is that they structure the different the content, and together we then shaped it and put it together and built this training here. Then we have expert videos as well in some of the trainings, where experts speak about the different topics as well. That's what employees always like, is to watch a video. What we do is we don't like if there's a video for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. So our videos are pretty short. It's only 2 to 3 minutes, and then it's the next one. That's important. And as I said, the trainings are really fun, motivating, and really have a long-lasting effect. So it's not the typical idea that an employee has to receive the certificate. That's of course important at the end of the training, but it's as well about that the employee learns something, that really the employee closes the training or finish the training and understands what LGPD or GDPR or different compliance topics are about, and what that really means for the employee. That's very important, because I know that many employees, they click through a training, receive the certificate, and at the end of the training, if you would ask them, did you learn anything, they would probably say no, because they just skipped the different tasks and infographics, and that's not possible in our training. So you have to scroll down, and at every section you have to understand what the section was about, and then it goes to the next section. And that's really unique. No one else is doing that as we do that. Again, so how does it really work to achieve this long-lasting effect? We have two ways of which we present to companies. So one is you can use our own platform. So we have a learn management system, which is super easy to use. So you can import your employees, you can invite them, you can monitor, so you can see who already finished the training, who didn't. There's an automatic reminder function. And at the end, you see the certificate and you can collect them. So think about a due diligence or an external audit, and someone requests to see all the certificates. It's super easy to click and you get all the certificates. So that's something we offer, but we have a different way as well. If you have your own learn management system, you can integrate our training. So that's super easy. So you receive our course in a SCORM or tin can file. We actually support all the different formats. You can integrate it super easily. You get updates from us during the contract period. And of course, you can use your internal reporting as well. And it's interesting, so from 100% of our customers, 60, 70% really train on our platform. But of course, really big companies like Volkswagen, Audi, and so forth, they train on their own platform. Correct. And here you see, even though it's quite small, you see our management cockpit. So it's super easy to use, and the main functions are in there, and it's all stored in the cloud. And super easy to export as well if you need the data. And that's something we give to you. So it's not something we basically manage. It's something really which the data privacy officer, for example, could use to see who already did the training and who not. So that's important. Then yeah, what I already said is we are super multilingual and super international. So we offer many different languages. You can use it on all the different devices, from iPads to iPhones, smartphones, normal computers, of course. Super interactive, and it's customizable. That's something Fábio said already. So if you have the feeling that something is missing for your company needs, then we can adjust that as well. So it's not that we start from scratch and build a new course. It's more that we adjust, let's say, 10 to 20% if that is really needed. But what we see is that especially LGPD, GDPR, so the main topics, you don't have to adjust them too much to your needs. But if you want, we can definitely do that. Here you see a portfolio, our portfolio. These are the 4 different areas which we offer. So data protection, compliance, IT security, and occupational safety and health. More and more topics are coming up, especially remote work topics, working from home topics because of COVID now. Whistleblowing is new, code of conduct is new, the LGPD course is new. So many new topics are popping up, and this is of course brilliant for us and great for the companies as well, because we take care of that. And we have big companies around the world which really focus, or which work together with us and buy a lot of trainings from different areas from us, because they have the feeling that before they would do it alone in their company internally, it's super easy to buy it from an expert like us. Yeah, here I already mentioned a few. So we have big organizations which really trust us. We just won Siemens last year, big German company, Konica Minolta, especially pretty strong in the Asian or in Asia. So Forrester on the German Red Cross, Audi, so really big companies around the globe, and yeah, actually from everywhere. So we're always happy to receive inbounds from companies or from countries where we had no contact so far. But we are more or less trained, or we more or less train employees all over the world nowadays, which is brilliant. Yeah, we are very happy because the participants are super satisfied, and yeah, the companies really like our methodology. So we won the e-learning award last year, which is actually about, or we won it for our methodology, which is brilliant. 2 times actually, and maybe this year again. And we get very good feedback from the employees, and they say it was such a great half an hour or hour. We really enjoyed the time. I would recommend it to my employee direct, or to my colleague directly. So that's really something which we really like, that the feedback is so positive. And that's it basically from my side. So if you really want to test the e-learning when it comes here to LGPD, data protection for employees, you're happy to do this. You can go to get.lawpilots.com/LGPD, or you can scan the code here, the QR code, and you get 3 licenses for free to test it. And of course, if you want more, then yeah, approach us or Fábio and the team. But this is something which we offer to, yeah, so you and your team can test it, and you can convince yourself. And that's it from my side. Yeah, that was the last slide. So yeah, I'm happy to receive some questions of Fábio.
Thank you very much, Philipp. Just a couple of things. The first thing is that as Veirano's clients, you get a discount. So you get a 30% discount, and then that's the advantage of being a Veirano client. So you can reach out either to us or to Philipp directly, or Philipp's team, and then you can use that discount. And the second, just to thank my team here, Roberta Medina, Cecilia Coutinho, Gabriela Caran, our marketing team here, because it was a huge effort to put this together, and it's on top of everything that we have to do in terms of being a lawyer. So and very, very happy with the end results. So I think now we can open for questions if you have. I don't know if the microphones can be open, or if you just put in the talk here, but yeah, if you have any questions, please be free to ask.
And maybe if people are just thinking about it, maybe one feedback to you, Fábio, as well. And I think that's really brilliant what you said, because the typical lawyer or the typical law firm is always a bit different, and that's so cool that you are so innovative and so outgoing, that you as a lawyer and you with your team put together such a training. It's not normal, and you help us really to and your clients to be compliant with the law and to be so innovative. So that's really brilliant, and that's not normal, I have to say, because normally let's say lawyers stick to their traditional plans and stick to their old manners, and it's really cool to see that such a huge company, law firm like you, are so flexible. That's really cool. It was a pleasure to work with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Philipp. Same here, and thanks for the opportunity. We don't have any questions in the screen here. So it looks clear. So I think if anyone wants to know more about the course, go to LawPilot's website, or reach out directly to me or to Philipp. The email is here, so you can see my email there. Just to share the screen.
Yeah.
So you can reach out directly to me or to Philipp in lawpilots, and then you mentioned that you are a client from Veirano, then you can test the course, of course, with the 3 license there, and then if you want to have more licenses, as Philipp says, then you get in touch with him. In our website, at the Veirano's website, there is also information on how to get the course and to get involved with the training. So thanks everyone for attending today. Thanks to Philipp and his team for interacting with us and formally after this year and a half of work. And hopefully the course will be very valuable for Brazilian companies here. Thanks a lot to everyone. So we'll close the session now.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.